Picture this, a crowded coffee shop, the line stretching out the door, and the barista just spilled an entire tray of drinks. Chaos erupts, people groan, frustration ripples through the room, but there's one person who stands out. He's calm, unshaken, even offering to help clean up the mess, and you notice her, the woman at the counter, watching him, not just with curiosity but with something deeper. Admiration, attraction, because in that moment his composure isn't just a fluke, it's a glimpse into something far more powerful, the quiet strength of Stoicism. This isn't about playing games or pretending to be someone you're not. It's about the undeniable magnetism of a man who embodies traits like resilience, clarity, and emotional mastery, qualities women instinctively recognize and respect. Stoicism isn't just a philosophy, it's a way of moving through the world that commands attention without demanding it. And here's the truth, women notice these traits faster than you might think. Whether it's the way you handle pressure, the depth of your focus, or the quiet confidence you exude, these aren't just random acts, they're the result of timeless principles that shape how you think, act, and ultimately how you're perceived. So what are these traits and why do they resonate so deeply? Over the next 25 points, we'll dive into the specific qualities that make Stoic men stand out, not because they're trying to impress, but because they've mastered the art of inner strength. These aren't just theories, they're practical, actionable ways of being that transform how you show up in every interaction. From the way you listen to the way you lead, from your patience in adversity to your ability to stay grounded in a world that's constantly shifting, these are the signals women pick up on, often without even realizing it. And by the end of this, you'll not only understand what makes these traits so compelling, you'll know exactly how to cultivate them in your own life. Ready to uncover what truly catches her attention? Let's begin. Think about the last time you saw someone lose their cool. Maybe a coworker snapped over a minor mistake, or a stranger erupted in traffic. Now picture the opposite, a man who takes the same situation and breathes through it unshaken. That's emotional resilience, and it's impossible to miss. Women notice this instantly, not because it's flashy, but because it's rare. When life throws a curveball, a failed project, a harsh comment, a plan falling apart, the way you respond speaks louder than any words. Stoicism teaches that true strength isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about acknowledging them without letting them steer the ship. Take criticism, for example. Most people react defensively, their ego scrambling to deflect blame. But a Stoic approach flips the script. Imagine you're at work and your idea gets shot down in a meeting. Instead of clenching your jaw or firing back, you pause. You consider whether there's truth in the feedback, what you can learn, and how to improve, all while keeping your demeanor steady. That's the kind of poise that catches her eye because it shows something deeper. A man who isn't fragile, who doesn't crumble when challenged or think about setbacks. Let's say you trained for months for a marathon, only to twist your ankle the week before. The average person might spiral into frustration, even self-pity. But resilience means focusing on what's within your control, adjusting your recovery plan, finding alternative ways to stay active, refusing to let one setback define your effort. Women pick up on this mindset because it's a glimpse into how you'll handle life's bigger storms. Will you blame the world or adapt and keep moving? Here's the Stoic secret. Resilience isn't about being emotionless. It's about channeling emotions into action rather than reaction. When Marcus Aurelius faced rebellions and plagues, he didn't ignore the weight of leadership. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. That's the core of what women recognize. It's not the absence of pressure, it's the way you stand firm within it. And that kind of quiet confidence, it's magnetic. So how do you build this? Start small. Next time something doesn't go your way, ask yourself, what part of this can I actually influence? Mentally separate the event from your interpretation of it. The criticism, the setback, the chaos, they're just events. Your response is where your power lies. And when you consistently choose calm over chaos, that's when she'll notice you're not like everyone else. There's a quiet power in the way a Stoic carries himself, not with chest-puffing bravado, but with an unshakable certainty that needs no validation. This is confidence without arrogance, and it's one of the most instantly noticeable traits women pick up on. Think about the last time you met someone who name-dropped their accomplishments within minutes versus someone who spoke with calm assurance, letting their competence reveal itself naturally. The difference isn't just obvious, it's magnetic. Stoic confidence isn't about convincing others of your worth. It's about knowing it so deeply that you don't need to. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome at its peak, never relied on titles to command respect. His journals reveal a man obsessed with self-improvement, not self-promotion. "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be," he wrote, "be one." That's the essence of Stoic confidence, action over announcement. Women recognize this because it's a reflection of inner stability. Arrogance shouts, "Look at me," while true confidence whispers, "I know who I am." And that whisper, it's far more compelling. Consider two men at a social event. One dominates conversations, steering every topic back to his achievements. The other listens intently, offers thoughtful insights, and isn't threatened when someone else shines. Which one leaves the lasting impression? Arrogance is insecurity in disguise, a performance that crumbles under scrutiny. But the Stoic's quiet assurance comes from a place of self-awareness. He understands his strengths and his flaws, so he doesn't need to exaggerate or hide. That authenticity is what draws people in, especially women, because it signals emotional maturity and security. Here's where Stoicism flips the script. Humility isn't weakness, it's the foundation of real strength. The more grounded you are in your own worth, the less you need to prove it. That's why women respond to this trait so strongly. It's a sign of a man who's comfortable in his own skin, who doesn't seek external validation because he's already done the internal work. When you're at ease with yourself, others feel at ease around you, and that's where connection begins. So how do you cultivate this? Start by shifting your focus from "how do I appear?" to "how do I contribute?" Confidence rooted in service, whether it's offering genuine support, sharing knowledge without condescension, or simply being fully present, never feels forced. Practice speaking less and listening more. When you do speak, let it be with purpose, not just to fill silence. And remember Marcus's advice: the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. In other words, the antidote to arrogance isn't self-deprecation. It's quiet, unwavering self-assurance. That's the kind of confidence that doesn't just catch her eye, it earns her respect. In a world where everyone seems to be waiting for their turn to talk, the ability to truly listen is like a superpower, and women notice it immediately. Stoic listening isn't just about silence while someone else speaks. It's about full presence, the kind of attention that makes the other person feel heard, not just heard of. Epictetus put it bluntly, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." That's not just etiquette, it's philosophy in action. Picture a first date where most men are scrambling to impress, dropping stories, pivoting conversations back to themselves, nervously filling every pause. Then there's the Stoic approach, asking thoughtful questions, absorbing her answers without mentally rehearsing your next line, and responding not just to her words but to what's behind them. That shift from performing to perceiving changes everything. Women don't just want to be entertained, they want to be understood. And when you listen with intentionality, you signal something rare, that you value her thoughts as much as your own. This isn't passive politeness. Stoic listening is an active discipline. Imagine you're in a heated discussion. Instead of reacting to the surface-level emotion, you pause. You ask yourself, what's the core of what she's saying? What's the unmet need or unspoken concern? That's the Stoic art of discernment, separating noise from substance. It's why Marcus Aurelius practiced listening with all your soul, not just your ears. When a woman feels you're fully engaged, not just waiting for your chance to speak, it builds trust. Because in that moment, you're not just hearing her, you're seeing her. Here's where most men stumble. They confuse listening with problem solving. She shares a frustration and they leap into fix-it mode. But Stoic wisdom teaches that often people don't want solutions, they want solidarity. Next time she vents about her day, try this. Mirror back her emotion. That sounds incredibly frustrating. Then simply ask, do you need advice or just space to vent? That question alone reveals more emotional intelligence than a dozen grand gestures. It shows you're listening not to reply, but to connect. The ancient Stoics trained for this like athletes. They'd practice prosochair attention, the art of being fully immersed in the present moment. Apply that to conversations. No glancing at your phone, no scanning the room, no half-hearted MMHMs. Your undivided focus becomes a mirror reflecting her worth, and that's what sticks with her long after the conversation ends. Not the witty punchlines you delivered, but the quiet certainty that she mattered to you. So how do you cultivate this? Start small. In your next interaction, count to 3 after she finishes speaking before you respond. Notice the urge to interrupt and let it pass. Ask follow-up questions that dig deeper. What about that bothered you most? And remember Epictetus' razor-sharp reminder. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Because real listening means surrendering the need to always be the smartest person in the room. And ironically, that's exactly what makes you stand out. Consider 2 men at a party. One brags about his promotion, his car, his follower count, external markers screaming for approval. The other speaks quietly about teaching literacy to kids in his free time, his eyes alight with quiet conviction. No fanfare, no need for applause. That's purpose, and it's palpable. Women don't just notice the difference, they feel it in their bones. A man driven by something deeper than ego or applause carries an energy that's impossible to fake. Stoicism calls this living in accordance with virtue, not chasing fleeting validation, but anchoring yourself to what truly matters. History nails this lesson. Take Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who stood alone against Julius Caesar's corruption, knowing it would cost him everything. His defiance wasn't for show, it flowed from an unbreakable moral compass. Women of his era, like his wife Marcia, didn't admire him for his power, but for his unwavering alignment with principle. Fast forward 2,000 years and little has changed. Purpose still speaks louder than status. A modern example, the entrepreneur turning down a shady deal because it conflicts with his values, or the artist working night shifts to fund his passion project. These aren't just nice guys, they're men whose North Star is integrity, not applause, and that kind of depth, it's catnip. Here's why this resonates so deeply with women. Purpose reveals priorities. When a man's actions align with his core beliefs, whether it's volunteering, building a business with ethics, or simply being the rock his family leans on, he broadcasts reliability. Not the performative white knight act, but quiet consistency. Think of Marcus Aurelius again, scribbling philosophy between battles, not because it made him look good, but because wisdom was his compass. That's the magnetic pull. Women instinctively recognize a man who won't bend to peer pressure, who won't trade his values for convenience because it signals something primal. This is someone who can be trusted when life gets hard. But here's the Stoic twist. Purpose isn't about grand gestures. It's found in the daily choices: the dad reading to his kids instead of scrolling, the boyfriend who remembers her favorite tea after a long day. Small acts rooted in intention speak volumes. Seneca wrote, "If one does not know to which port one is sailing, no wind is favorable." Women sense when a man knows his port. It's not about the destination, it's the clarity of direction. That's why a barrister saving for med school or a mechanic mentoring troubled teens often outshines the flashy guy with empty ambitions. So how do you cultivate this? Start by asking the Stoics' favorite question. What's truly mine to do? Not what impresses others, not what's easy, but what aligns with your deepest sense of right. Then, and this is key, let actions, not words, carry the weight. Purpose isn't something you declare, it's something you live, one unglamorous, unsung choice at a time. And when a woman sees that kind of quiet dedication, she doesn't just notice, she remembers. Rejection stings, there's no sugarcoating it, but here's what separates the Stoic from the reactive. While both feel the sting, only one lets it refine rather than define him. Picture a man who asks a woman out and hears no. The average guy might sulk, lash out, or worse, beg for a reason as if her answer were a puzzle to solve. The Stoic, he nods, thanks her for her honesty, and moves forward without a drop of bitterness. That's not indifference, it's mastery, and women notice the difference immediately because how a man handles no reveals more about his character than how he handles yes. Seneca, who faced exile, betrayal, and ultimately death by his own student, wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Stoicism reframes rejection not as a verdict on your worth, but as an inevitable part of life's friction, one that polishes you if you let it. Women instinctively respect this mindset because it signals emotional security. A man who doesn't crumble at rejection proves he doesn't rely on external validation to feel whole. His confidence isn't borrowed, it's built. Consider two scenarios. First, a guy gets ghosted after a few dates. He bombards her with texts, "Why won't you reply? Was it something I said?" pulling her into an emotional tug of war. Contrast that with the man who receives silence, accepts it as closure, and simply moves on. No drama, no demands. That quiet dignity speaks volumes. It tells her, and every woman observing, that he's secure enough to respect her choice even when it doesn't favor him. Here's the deeper truth women recognize: rejection is a test of boundaries. The way a man responds shows whether he sees women as autonomous individuals or as means to an end. When Seneca lost friends, political favor, even his health, he didn't plead or manipulate. He wrote, "Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling." The Stoic embraces the freedom in letting go. That's why women find this trait so compelling. It's proof you value their agency as much as your own. But grace under rejection isn't just about romantic outcomes. Think of job applications, creative projects, or even family disagreements. The principle remains: Stoicism teaches detachment from outcomes, not from effort. You can pour your soul into a pursuit while holding the result lightly. That balance, giving your best without clinging to the prize, is magnetic. Women spot it in the way you talk about past failures without resentment, or how you cheer for others' successes without envy. So how do you cultivate this? Start by reframing rejection as redirection. Every no clears space for a yes that aligns better with your path. Practice Seneca's exercise of premeditatio malorum, mentally rehearsing setbacks before they happen. When you've already accepted that rejection is possible, it loses its power to destabilize you. And here's the paradox: the less you fear no, the more attractive your resilience becomes. Because in the end, women aren't drawn to the man who never faces rejection, they're drawn to the one who never lets it break him. Ever watched a firework explode? The sudden burst of noise and color, then nothing but smoke. That's how most people handle conflict: instant reaction followed by empty aftermath. Now imagine a different scene. Someone throws a verbal jab, maybe a backhanded compliment or dismissive remark, and instead of firing back, the man across from them just pauses. Not frozen, not passive, but deliberately choosing his response. That split-second hesitation, it's one of the most intriguing things a woman will notice about you. Because in a world of knee-jerk reactions, the Stoic pause is a silent declaration of self-control. Take a common scenario: you're at a gathering and someone makes a snide comment about your career choice. The crowd tenses, waiting for your counterpunch, but you don't take the bait. Instead, you smile slightly and say, "Interesting perspective," then pivot the conversation elsewhere. That's not avoidance, it's strategy. Epictetus put it bluntly, any person capable of angering you becomes your master. Women pick up on this mastery instantly. When you refuse to be yanked into petty battles, you reveal something rare, emotional sovereignty. Here's why this resonates so deeply. Reactivity is primal. It's the amygdala hijacking your higher brain. But non-reactivity, that's evolution. Picture two men in traffic. One leans on his horn, face red, veins popping. The other exhales, adjusts his grip on the wheel, and finds a detour. Both feel the frustration, but only one commands it. Women recognize this distinction because it mirrors an ancient truth. The quieter the mind, the greater the strength. Marcus Aurelius scribbled reminders to himself like, "The best revenge is to not be like your enemy." In other words, the real power move isn't winning the argument, it's refusing to let the argument dictate your state. But here's where most men misunderstand Stoic non-reactivity. It's not about swallowing anger or playing the martyr, it's about processing before expressing. Imagine your coworker takes credit for your idea in a meeting. The reactive response, calling them out publicly, escalating tension, the Stoic alternative. Wait, breathe, then address it privately later with measured clarity. "I noticed you presented my concept as yours. Let's align on credit moving forward." That shift from heat to precision doesn't just resolve conflict, it earns respect. Women spot this nuance because it signals emotional intelligence, the kind that de-escalates dramas before they ignite. The Stoics practiced this like a martial art. They called it provocation, the discipline of assent, the gap between stimulus and response. Modern psychology echoes it. Viktor Frankl's famous insight that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom. Women are drawn to men who inhabit that space consistently, not because they're indifferent, but because they're intentional. So how do you cultivate non-reactivity? Start small. Next time someone cuts you in line, notice the flash of irritation, then let it pass without action. When a text message rubs you the wrong way, set the phone down for 5 minutes before replying. These micro moments train your brain to default to pause, not reflex. And when a woman sees you navigate chaos with that calm, she doesn't just see composure, she sees a man who's mastered himself. And that's a trait no one overlooks. He's just spilled coffee all over his shirt, dark stains spreading, the cup rolling across the floor, and instead of cursing or panicking, he throws his head back and laughs. Not a nervous chuckle, but genuine amusement. The people around him freeze for a second, then start laughing too, tension dissolving like sugar in hot water. That's the magic of humor in adversity, and it's a trait women instantly gravitate toward. Not because it's performative or forced, but because it reveals something profound. A man who refuses to let minor catastrophes steal his joy. Stoicism gets mislabeled as grim endurance, but the ancient texts tell a different story. Epictetus, born a slave and crippled by his master's brutality, still joked about life's absurdities. He wrote, "If someone tried to take control of your body, you'd fight back. Yet you hand over your mind to anyone who insults you." There's wit in that, a playful refusal to take oneself too seriously. Women notice this balance, the strength to withstand life's blows paired with the lightness to laugh at its fumbles. It's not about dismissing pain, it's about rising above pettiness. Think of the last time you witnessed a public mishap, maybe a waiter tripped, sending plates crashing. The cringe-worthy moment isn't the fall, it's the aftermath. Most people either over-apologize or seethe with embarrassment, but the man who grins, shrugs, and quips, "Well, that's one way to make an entrance," transforms the energy in the room. Humor becomes his armor, not against the struggle, but against the shame we attach to it, and women recognize this immediately. It signals emotional agility, the ability to bend without breaking. Marcus Aurelius faced plague, war, and betrayal, yet his meditations include reminders to greet the day with laughter, not as denial but as defiance. Here's the Stoic secret: joy isn't the absence of hardship, it's the decision not to let hardship dictate your spirit. When a man can trip on a sidewalk, dust himself off, and deadpan, "The pavement and I had a disagreement," he's not just saving face, he's demonstrating mastery over his inner narrative. So how do you cultivate this? Start by reframing mishaps as material. Lost your keys, instead of fuming, mutter, "Guess they're auditioning for a hide-and-seek championship." Rained out on a picnic, nature just upgraded us to a cozy indoor edition. The goal isn't to become a stand-up comic. Forced humor feels hollow. It's about developing an inner commentary that leans toward levity. Women sense when laughter comes from a place of resilience, not avoidance, because the man who can laugh at life stumbles, he's the one they trust to navigate its falls. She says she needs a night to herself, no elaborate explanation, no apology, just a simple statement of need. Most men hear this and panic, scrambling to decode hidden meanings or negotiate for her time. But the Stoic, he nods, tells her to enjoy her evening, and carries on with his own plans. That's respect for boundaries in action, and it's one of the most underrated yet powerful traits women notice immediately. Not because it's flashy, but because it's trust in its purest form. Stoicism teaches that each person's autonomy is inviolable, not out of indifference, but out of deep reverence for individual sovereignty. Think about how often men mistake persistence for passion, confusing relentless pursuit with devotion. The ancient Stoics would have called this a fundamental error in judgment. Epictetus, who endured slavery, understood autonomy better than most. What is yours, what isn't, isn't. When a man respects a woman's boundaries, whether it's her time, her emotional space, or her right to say no, he's not just being polite, he's demonstrating a core Stoic principle: ownership of the self. Women recognize this because boundary respect isn't passive compliance, it's active affirmation of her agency. Consider two scenarios. First, a guy texts repeatedly after she's said she's busy, each message dripping with neediness. Did I do something wrong? Are you mad at me? Now contrast that with the man who receives silence and responds by giving her room, no strings attached. The difference isn't just maturity, it's philosophy in motion. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." A man who respects boundaries isn't haunted by imagined slights because he's anchored in reality, not desperation. But here's where Stoic boundary respect goes deeper than modern dating advice. It's not about playing it cool to manipulate outcomes. It's about genuine detachment from what isn't yours to control. Picture a woman canceling plans last minute. The average reaction might be guilt-tripping. "I was really looking forward to this," while the Stoic response is understanding. "No worries, we'll regroup when you're ready." That shift from entitlement to equanimity reveals a man secure enough to honor her limits without taking them personally. The irony: boundaries don't push women away, they draw them closer. Like a well-tended garden fence, they create conditions where trust can grow. Seneca, who advised Nero before the emperor's tyranny, knew this firsthand. He who is everywhere is nowhere. A man who clings to every interaction suffocates connection, while one who gives space allows attraction to breathe. Women sense this intuitively, that the man unshaken by their independence is the one who values their presence, not their validation. So how do you cultivate this? Start by auditing your own reactions. When someone sets a boundary, do you respect it or seek loopholes? Practice the Stoic art of assent, recognizing what's outside your control without resistance. Next time she says she needs space, match her honesty with your own stability. "Got it, I'll be here when you're ready." No drama, no hidden tests, just quiet consistency. Because in the end, a woman doesn't just want to feel wanted, she wants to feel free, and the man who understands that, he's the one she chooses to return to. Imagine two men entering a high-stakes negotiation. The first adjusts his stance with every counteroffer, softening his terms when met with resistance, hardening them when he senses weakness, his strategy as fluid as water, shaped entirely by the container of the moment. The second man listens carefully, speaks plainly, and when pressed to compromise on a core principle, simply says, "I can't do that, but here's where I can move." That's consistency in values, and it's a trait women spot like a lighthouse beam cutting through fog, not because it's rigid, but because it's reliable. Stoicism frames integrity not as stubbornness, but as alignment, a life where actions and beliefs share the same heartbeat. History offers a masterclass in this distinction. Take Thomas More, the Renaissance statesman who chose execution over endorsing a king's divorce. His famous last words, "I die the king's good servant, but God's first," weren't theatrics. They were the culmination of a lifetime refusing to barter his conscience for convenience. Contrast that with modern politicians who poll test their convictions. Women observe this dichotomy daily. The co-worker who laughs at off-color, jokes when the boss tells them versus the one who maintains the same respectful tone whether he's with interns or CEOs. It's not about moral grandstanding, it's about the quiet courage to stay recognizable to yourself in every context. Here's why this resonates so deeply with women. Consistency in values is predictive. A man whose behavior shifts with his audience is like a weather vane. You never know which way he'll turn when the wind changes, but a man who treats the janitor with the same respect as the chairman. That's a man whose character isn't up for auction. Marcus Aurelius called this living in agreement with nature, not the natural world, but your own innate reason. When a woman sees you tip the same whether the waiter's watching, or defend an unpopular opinion among friends just as you would alone, she's glimpsing your operating system. And that's what makes trust possible, but there's a critical nuance here. Consistency isn't about never growing or adapting, it's about evolution grounded in core principles. Think of Seneca advising Lucilius, "Progress isn't changing your essence, it's polishing it." A Stoic refines his views with new evidence, but he doesn't flip-flop to curry favor. Imagine a man who's vegan for ethical reasons suddenly feasting on steak at a business dinner to impress clients. The dissonance isn't in the diet, it's in the desperation. Women notice when a man's convictions have price tags. The modern dating scene magnifies this. The guy who morphs his personality to match each woman's interests, outdoorsy with the hiker, intellectual with the bookworm, might score initial dates, but he'll rarely build lasting connection. Why? Because authenticity can't be faked long-term. Epictetus captured this with typical bluntness. If you try to be two people, the one others want and the one you truly are, you'll end up being neither. Women aren't looking for a mirror, they're seeking a man who stands solid while the world sways. So how do you cultivate this? Start by identifying your non-negotiables. What 3 principles would you uphold even if it cost you? Then practice the Stoic exercise of premeditatio, anticipating scenarios where those values might be tested. When you've already decided who you are, situational compromises lose their grip. And when a woman encounters that kind of unwavering alignment, she doesn't just see a man, she sees a landmark. Picture a man who wakes up not to the blare of an alarm, but to a moment of silent reflection, taking stock of the simple gifts most overlook: the warmth of sunlight through the window, the reliability of his health, the presence of people who choose to share their lives with him. That's Stoic gratitude in motion, and it's a trait that transforms how women experience a man's presence. Not the performative thank yous of politeness, but a deep, abiding recognition of life's abundance, even in its ordinary moments. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who valued relationships above accolades, put it plainly: what greater wealth is there than to live with a thankful heart? That wealth isn't just internal, it radiates outward, shaping how a man engages with the world, and especially with the woman beside him. Consider how gratitude operates in relationships. The average guy might focus on what's missing: her occasional moodiness, the date nights that don't go perfectly, the small ways reality falls short of fantasy. But the Stoic, he trains himself to see what's present, the way she remembers his coffee order, the effort she puts into balancing work and connection, the simple fact that amid billions of souls, theirs keep choosing each other. This isn't wishful thinking, it's a disciplined practice. Marcus Aurelius began each day listing specifics. I can endure this partner because she's patient with my flaws. I can cherish this meal because someone grew it, harvested it, prepared it. That granular awareness applied to relationships changes everything. Women feel it when a man's appreciation isn't generic but precise. Here's where Stoic gratitude separates from hollow positivity. It doesn't ignore life's challenges, it contextualizes them. Imagine a couple stuck in traffic on their anniversary dinner plans. The frustrated man fixates on the ruined reservation. The grateful one shifts focus. At least we're together. At least we're healthy enough to have anniversaries. That pivot isn't denial, it's perspective. Musonius taught that gratitude is the antidote to entitlement, the reminder that nothing in life is owed, only gifted. Women resonate with this mindset because it breeds contentment, not complacency. A man who sees their time together as a privilege, not an expectation, carries himself differently, less needy, more present. But the real power lies in expression. Stoic gratitude isn't just felt, it's conveyed. Think of Seneca's letters to Lucilius, filled with specific acknowledgments. Your advice last Tuesday saved me 3 hours of wasted effort. Contrast that with the vague, thanks for everything most people default to. When a man tells his partner, I noticed you rearranged your schedule to pick up my mom. That meant the world to me. He's not just thanking her. He's seeing her, and that level of attention is what makes love feel real, not routine. So how do you cultivate this? Start with the Stoic evening reflection. Review the day and note 3 concrete things she did, or life provided, that you might have overlooked. Then voice one, not as flattery but as witness, because gratitude isn't just about counting blessings, it's about revealing them. And when a woman feels truly noticed, not just appreciated, that's when gratitude stops being a trait and starts being a language. There's a quiet electricity in the moment before a decision, the pulse of uncertainty, the weight of choice hanging in the air. Most people hesitate, second guess, or defer to others. But the Stoic, he steps forward, not recklessly, not impulsively, but with a kind of clarity that cuts through noise like a blade through fog. That's decisiveness, and it's one of the most viscerally attractive traits women notice in men. Not because it's domineering, but because it's anchored. Stoicism reframes decision-making not as a gamble, but as an exercise in moral courage, a willingness to own the consequences of your choices, whatever they may be. History's Stoics were masters of this. Take Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who famously opposed Julius Caesar's power grab. When his allies wavered, urging compromise to save their skins, Cato didn't flinch. He chose principle over preservation, knowing it would cost him everything. Plutarch recounts how even Caesar, his enemy, admitted Cato's unshakable resolve commanded respect. That's the essence of Stoic decisiveness, not stubbornness, but conviction so deeply rooted that hesitation becomes unthinkable. Women recognize this quality instantly, not because they want a man to make all their choices for them, but because a partner who trusts his own judgment creates a rare sense of safety. It's the difference between navigating life with a compass versus a weather vane. Here's where modern men misunderstand this trait. Decisiveness isn't about always being right, it's about being resolute. Picture a couple debating where to dine. The indecisive man cycles through endless options, paralyzed by fear of picking wrong, the Stoic alternative. He suggests 2 solid choices, then confidently selects one. Let's try the Italian place. If it's bad, we'll laugh about it later. That shift from seeking perfection to embracing agency changes the energy entirely. Women don't need a man with infallible taste. They're drawn to one who can commit, turning a minor decision into an adventure rather than an ordeal. But Stoic decisiveness shines brightest under pressure. Imagine a crisis, a medical emergency, a financial setback. The reactive man freezes or frantically crowdsources opinions. The Stoic assesses swiftly, acts deliberately, and adjusts as needed. Marcus Aurelius faced this daily as emperor, writing, "The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing because it requires standing firm against sudden and unexpected blows." Women notice this steadiness because it signals something primal. This is someone who can be relied upon when the storm hits, not because he has all the answers, but because he trusts his capacity to find them. The irony, decisiveness isn't about speed, it's about process. Epictetus taught that every choice should pass two filters. Is this within my control? And does this align with my principles? Apply that to dating. A woman asks if you'd relocate for your career. The hesitant man hedges, maybe, it depends. The decisive one reflects, then answers, if the role honored my values, yes, but I'd want us to weigh it together. That's not rigidity, it's clarity. And clarity, women learn quickly, is the foundation of trust. So how do you cultivate this? Start small. Next time you're choosing a film or a meal, commit without apology. Practice the Stoics' reserve clause, acting while accepting that outcomes aren't guaranteed. I'll decide with my best judgment and adapt if needed. Because in the end, women aren't drawn to men who never make mistakes. They're drawn to men who never make excuses. Watch two men sitting across from each other at a dinner date, one nervously rattling off jokes and stories, eyes darting for her reaction after every sentence, while the other leans back, comfortable in the pauses, listening more than he speaks, his silence not empty but full of presence. That's the power of comfort with silence, and it's one of the most subtly magnetic traits a man can embody. Stoicism doesn't teach silence as avoidance or shyness, but as mindfulness in motion, the space where thought breathes and observation thrives. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire amid constant noise, wrote in his private journal, "You don't have to turn this into something, it doesn't have to upset you." That's the essence, the ability to let moments unfold without forcing them, to be at ease when words aren't required. Consider how rare this is today. Most people treat silence like a vacuum to be filled, rambling about weather, over-explaining, or worse, defaulting to their phones. But the Stoic recognizes that silence isn't absence, it's potential. It's the pause before a meaningful response, the quiet that lets her thoughts settle, the confidence to share space without performance. Women notice this instantly because it signals depth. A man who doesn't scramble to entertain is a man secure enough to let connection build naturally. Think of the difference between a crowded party and a mountain vista. One overwhelms with noise, the other awes with its vast, wordless presence. That's the effect a Stoic silence creates, room for her to feel heard, not just crowded. Here's where modern dating misses the mark. The always-on mentality teaches men to equate attention with value. The more you talk, the more you're noticed. But the Stoics knew better. Epictetus, the former slave-turned-philosopher, warned, if you pour a handful of salt into a cup of water, the water becomes undrinkable. But if you pour it into a river, it vanishes. Silence is that river, the capacity to hold life's sharpness without becoming bitter or frantic. When a woman shares a vulnerable story, the man who listens deeply, who lets her words linger without rushing to fix or relate, offers something priceless, the gift of being truly received. Practical silence isn't about saying nothing, it's about speaking with intention. Picture a disagreement where tempers flare. The reactive man interrupts, defends, escalates. The Stoic, he lets her finish, he breathes, he responds instead of reacts. That 3-second pause isn't passivity, it's mastery. Marcus Aurelius practiced this amid political betrayals, writing, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." Women sense this strength in the unspoken. It's the difference between a man who fills first dates with rehearsed anecdotes and one who asks, "Tell me about what lights you up," then genuinely listens, his silence an invitation for her to unfold. So how do you cultivate this? Start by reframing silence as active, not passive. In conversations, count to 3 after she speaks before responding, not as a tactic but as discipline. Notice the urge to fill gaps with chatter and resist it. Practice solitary silence too. Sit with your thoughts for 5 minutes daily, no distractions. Over time, you'll stop seeing quiet as awkward and start seeing it as what it truly is, the canvas where connection is painted. Because when a man is at peace with silence, he sends an unmistakable message that he's not just waiting for his turn to speak, but truly present. And that kind of presence, it's unforgettable. The meeting room goes silent after the project crashes, deadline missed, client furious. One team member crosses his arms, the data team gave us bad numbers. Another sighs, marketing changed the specs last minute. Then there's the guy who leans forward, steady-eyed. I underestimated the timeline, here's how we fix it. That shift from finger-pointing to ownership is accountability in action, and it's a trait women recognize instantly, not because it's flashy, but because it's fundamentally rare. Stoicism frames accountability not as weakness, but as integrity in its purest form, the willingness to see your own role in events clearly, without sugarcoating or scapegoating. Consider 2 dating scenarios. First, a man forgets an anniversary. When his partner expresses hurt, he deflects, "Work's been crazy, and you know how bad my memory is." Now contrast that with the response rooted in Stoic principle. "You're right, I didn't prioritize this, how can I make it up to you?" That simple pivot from excuse to ownership changes everything. Women don't expect perfection, they expect honesty, because a man who can say, "I messed up" without crumbling reveals a strength far deeper than bravado, the courage to face his own humanity. The ancient Stoics drilled this relentlessly. Epictetus, born into slavery, had every reason to blame others for his circumstances, yet he taught, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond that defines you." When a man takes responsibility for his actions, whether it's a minor oversight or a major misstep, he's channeling that same ethos. Women sense this immediately because accountability is a form of respect. It says, "You deserve the truth even when it's unflattering." Here's where most men get stuck. They confuse accountability with self-flagellation, beating themselves up to appear virtuous. But Stoic accountability is solution-oriented. Imagine a boyfriend who snaps in frustration after a long day. The performative approach wallows in guilt. "I'm the worst, I don't deserve you." The Stoic alternative: acknowledge the behavior plainly, "That was unfair to you," then focus on change. "I'll take a walk next time I'm stressed." Women recognize the difference between empty remorse and actionable growth. The workplace magnifies this principle. A manager who blames external factors for failures, "The market shifted, the team dropped the ball," erodes trust. But the leader who says, "I misallocated resources, here's the adjustment," commands respect. Seneca, who advised Nero before the emperor's downfall, wrote, "A guilty person's first punishment is their own conscience." Accountability isn't about punishment, it's about alignment. When a man's actions match his words, he becomes predictable in the best way, someone who can be trusted to face hard truths head-on. So how do you cultivate this? Start small. When you're late, skip "Traffic was awful," try "I didn't leave early enough." Notice the urge to justify mistakes and pause. Ask Marcus Aurelius' daily question, "Where did I fall short today?" Not to dwell, but to grow. Because the man who owns his stumbles doesn't just earn respect, he builds the kind of character that draws people toward him, not away. And that's a trait no woman overlooks. He hands the homeless man his lunch not for cameras, not for praise, but because the guy looked hungry. No fanfare, no waiting for acknowledgement, just a quiet transfer of warmth from one human to another before walking away. That's generosity without expectation, and it's a trait that lingers in a woman's memory long after the act itself. Stoicism reframes giving not as transactional charity, but as natural as breathing, a fundamental expression of our shared humanity. Seneca wrote, "Wherever there is a human being, there's an opportunity for kindness." And women notice when a man lives that truth without needing an audience to validate it. The internet recently spotlighted this in a way that went viral for all the right reasons. A college student named David was filmed without his knowledge carrying an elderly stranger's groceries up 5 flights of stairs in a building with a broken elevator. When the video surfaced months later, his response was pure Stoic indifference to the applause. It was just the right thing to do. No humble bragging, no leveraging the moment for clout. That disconnect between his actions and his reaction to the attention struck a chord, because true generosity isn't performative, it's instinctive. Women recognize this distinction instantly. It's the difference between a man who donates to charity for the Instagram story and one who anonymously covers a single mom's grocery bill because he overheard her counting change. Here's the deeper truth Stoics understood: expectation poisons generosity. Epictetus warned, when you do a kindness, it evaporates the moment you seek something in return. Modern psychology confirms this acts tied to external rewards activate stress responses, while selfless giving triggers lasting dopamine spikes. Apply that to relationships: the guy who listens intently to her work, frustrations without segueing into his own accomplishments, or the one who offers his jacket when she's cold without playfully angling for gratitude. These micro moments reveal a man secure enough to give without keeping score. But there's a critical nuance. Stoic generosity isn't about self-neglect, it's about discernment. Marcus Aurelius cautioned, "What's not good for the hive isn't good for the bee." A man who burns himself out rescuing others eventually has nothing left to give. The balance: helping from abundance, not depletion. Think of the firefighter who rushes into burning buildings but also trains rigorously to ensure he's physically prepared. Women notice this equilibrium, the capacity to give freely while maintaining healthy boundaries. It's the difference between the coworker who covers every shift without complaint and secretly resents it and the one who says, "I can take Tuesday, but I need to prioritize my family this weekend." Both are generous, only one is sustainable. Practical generosity also thrives in the mundane. A Stoic doesn't wait for grand gestures to prove his character. It's in the daily rhythms, letting a stressed driver merge ahead of him without scowling, tipping the hotel housekeeper double after noticing her worn shoes, or remembering his sister's favorite tea when she's sick. These aren't just niceties, they're proof of an outward-focused mindset. Women catalog these details because they signal how a man will show up in relationships, not when it's convenient, but when it counts. So how do you cultivate this? Start by auditing your motives. Next time you do something kind, notice if you're waiting, even subconsciously, for recognition. Practice Seneca's stealth benevolence. Pay for a stranger's coffee without announcing it. Leave a generous tip in cash so it can't be traced back. The goal isn't secrecy for its own sake. It's rewiring the brain to associate giving with intrinsic satisfaction. Because when generosity becomes its own reward, it stops being an act and starts being who you are, and that's the version of a man women never forget. The gym is packed with resolutioners in January, grunting through workouts, snapping progress pics, counting every rep, but by March the crowd's thin. By June, it's back to the regulars. That's the difference between motivation and patience, the ability to show up when the novelty wears off, when results aren't immediate, when the work feels invisible. Stoic patience isn't passive waiting, it's active endurance, the kind of quiet persistence women recognize in men who build careers, relationships, and lives worth respecting. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire while battling chronic illness, wrote, "The impediment becomes the way." That's patience as philosophy, not just enduring hardship, but transforming it into the very path forward. History's greatest Stoics were masters of the long game. Consider Zeno, founder of Stoicism, who lost everything in a shipwreck: wealth, status, even his identity, only to rebuild his life through years of study in Athens. Stoas, the colonnades that gave Stoicism its name. There's a reason women gravitate toward men with this quality. Patience reveals temperament. The guy who practices guitar daily without posting covers after week 1. The entrepreneur reinvesting profits for 5 years before taking a salary. The father reading bedtime stories through his exhaustion. These are men telegraphing something profound. They understand that worthy things take root slowly. Modern dating tests this acutely. The average guy wants chemistry to spark instantly. The Stoic cultivates it like a gardener. He plans thoughtful dates without pressuring for intimacy, listens to her stories without rushing to impress with his own, understands that trust isn't microwaved, it's slow roasted. Women notice this restraint because it signals security. Impatience screams scarcity mentality. I must claim you now or lose you. A wild patience whispers abundance. I'm here, present, whether this takes weeks or years. But here's where Stoic patience diverges from mere passivity. It's not about tolerating disrespect or settling for less. It's about discerning between what's worth enduring and what's worth exiting. Epictetus, enslaved as a child, drew this line starkly. Endure hardship, but never in service to vice. Apply that to relationships: patience with a partner's flaws. Admirable, patience with repeated boundary violations, self-betrayal. Women respect men who know the difference, who can weather life's storms without anchoring to dysfunction. The workplace magnifies this trait. 2 colleagues get passed over for promotion. One complains loudly, updates his LinkedIn, and coasts. The other audits his skills, volunteers for stretch assignments, and mentors newcomers, playing a longer, quieter game. Guess who earns the team's trust? Guess who catches the eye of women who value substance over spectacle? Seneca, who counseled Emperor Nero before the tyrant turned on him, observed, "Time heals what reason cannot." Stoic patience isn't blind hope, it's strategic trust in process. So how do you cultivate this? Start by reframing delays as design. Traffic jam, opportunity to practice deep breathing. Career plateau, chance to hone neglected skills. Relationship tension, space to listen rather than react. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say. Mortality's shadow makes patience urgent, not as procrastination, but as presence. Because the man unshaken by life's pauses is the one women see as her harbor in every storm. The party hums with overlapping conversations, laughter here, a heated debate there, but in one corner, a group leans in closer, voices dropping to whispers. Did you hear about Sarah and Mark? Apparently they. The gossip spirals, each edition juicier than the last. Then there's him, the guy who sips his drink, nods politely but doesn't take the bait. When pressed, "Come on, you must have an opinion," he just smiles. I'm not the best judge of other people's business. That's detachment from drama in action, and it's like a spotlight in a room full of shadows. Women notice this instantly, not because it's aloof, but because it's a rare form of respect. Stoicism calls this adiaphora, the art of discerning what's worth your energy and what's just noise. Think about why gossip feels addictive. It's a false shortcut to connection, trading intimacy for intrigue. The Stoics saw through this centuries ago. Epictetus, who endured slavery and cruelty, warned, if someone speaks badly of you, instead of trying to defend yourself, consider whether what they say is true. If it is, correct yourself. If it isn't, laugh inwardly and move on. That's the core of detachment, the refusal to let other people's narratives hijack your peace. When a man won't engage in office politics or friend group whispering campaigns, women register something profound. This is someone who won't turn their private struggles into public entertainment. Consider 2 co-workers at a happy hour. One fuels the rumor mill, Jessica got promoted because she's tight with the boss. The other redirects, I've seen Jessica stay late all month, she earned it. The difference isn't just moral, it's magnetic. Women gravitate toward men who lift rather than tear down because it reveals priorities. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is to not be like your enemy." In modern terms, the high road isn't just virtuous, it's attractive. But here's where Stoic detachment differs from apathy. It's not about ignoring conflict, it's about refusing to manufacture it. Picture a couple's argument where he says, "I'm not debating who started this. How do we fix it?" That pivot from blame to solution shuts down drama at the root. Women respect this because it signals emotional efficiency. A man who won't waste time on theatrics but will dig deep for real resolution. Social media amplifies this test. The guy who posts vague subtweets about fake friends broadcasts insecurity. The one who scrolls past provocations without engaging, that's quiet power. Seneca observed, "We suffer more in imagination than reality." Detachment isn't coldness, it's the wisdom to know which battles are shadows. So how do you cultivate this? Start by auditing your conversations. Notice when you're tempted to vent or validate yourself through others' misfortunes. Practice the Stoic pause before sharing news about someone. Ask, is this useful? Is it kind? Is it mine to share? Because in the end, women don't just want a man who avoids drama, they want one who transcends it entirely, and that kind of peace. It's contagious. Watch any crowded space, a subway platform, a coffee line, and you'll spot the difference instantly. Most people slump over their phones, shoulders rounded, weight shifted unevenly, their bodies whispering exhaustion before they speak a word. Then there's him, the man who stands like he's got all the time in the world, spine aligned, shoulders relaxed but squared, movements deliberate without being stiff. That's Stoic physical presence, and it's not an accident. It's the visible echo of mind-body discipline, a trait women recognize before they even process why. Because posture isn't just about anatomy, it's about philosophy in motion. The ancient Stoics didn't separate mental fortitude from physical bearing. Take the gladiators, men trained not just to fight, but to embody control. Historical accounts describe their regimens, hours spent practicing footwork in sand pits to build stability, wrestling drills to cultivate balance, even breathing exercises to steady the voice under stress. Why? Because in the arena, hesitation meant death. A flinch betrayed fear, a slouched stance invited attack, but the gladiators who moved with economy and calm. They commanded attention beyond brute strength. Women today respond to that same energy, not the performative machismo of puffed chests, but the quiet assurance of a man whose body aligns with his mind. Modern science backs this up. Researchers at Harvard and Ohio State found that people who simply adjusted their posture to stand taller were perceived as 15% more confident and assertive, even when judges only saw silent video clips. But here's the Stoic twist. It's not about appearing confident. It's about the feedback loop between posture and mindset. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Turns out the body does too. When you straighten your spine, you're not just signaling calm to others, you're telling your nervous system, we're steady here. Consider two men at a networking event. The first fidgets, shifting weight, tapping fingers, eyes darting. The second plants his feet hip-width apart, gestures smoothly, keeps his chin level. Even if their words are identical, women will intuitively trust the latter. Why? Because fluid movement signals emotional regulation. The Stoics called this eutaxia, orderliness of the self. It's why Navy SEAL trained to move slowly under fire, why samurai practiced tea ceremonies. Mastery reveals itself in restraint, but physical presence isn't about rigidity. Watch a lion prowl, every muscle engaged, yet utterly at ease. That's the balance. A Stoic's walk isn't stiff, it's economical. He doesn't rush doorways or crowd personal space because he respects boundaries, even spatial ones. Epictetus, who was literally crippled by a cruel master, still taught, "Circumstances don't make the man, they reveal him. Your posture under stress, whether you collapse inward or stand grounded, is your autobiography in real time." So how do you cultivate this? Start with the gladiator's toolkit. Practice standing like a man who's carried weight before, feet rooted, knees soft, shoulders stacked over hips. Breathe from your diaphragm, not your chest. It lowers vocal pitch and steadies nerves. Walk as if you're crossing a familiar room in the dark, purposeful, unhurried. Because when a woman sees a man who occupies space like he belongs there without apology or aggression, she doesn't just see poise. She sees peace, and that's a magnet no algorithm can explain. She's just asked a question most men dread. Does this dress make me look bigger? The room holds its breath. One response dodges, "You always look amazing." Another stumbles into brutal honesty. "Yeah, it's not flattering, but the Stoic," he meets her eyes. "It's not your best silhouette, but I love how confident you seem in the blue one." That's honest communication, truth without cruelty, clarity without agenda, and it's one of the most quietly transformative traits women recognize in a man. Stoicism reframes honesty not as a blunt instrument, but as a bridge built with two materials: respect for reality and reverence for the person hearing it. Seneca wrote, "Speech is the mirror of the soul," and women instinctively know when a man's words reflect his character, not just convenience. Consider the difference between truth-telling and truth-serving. The average guy might withhold opinions to avoid conflict. Your lasagna is great. When it's overcooked or weaponize honesty to assert dominance. "I'm just being real, you're terrible at managing money." Stoic communication rejects both extremes. It's the co-worker who says, "Your presentation had strong research, but the pacing lost people want to rehearse together." Or the boyfriend who acknowledges, "I need some alone time tonight, but I'd love to plan something special this weekend." These aren't just statements, they're blueprints for trust. Women notice because honesty without empathy is noise, while honesty with purpose is intimacy. The ancient Stoics drilled this balance. Marcus Aurelius cautioned, "If it's not true, don't say it. If it's not helpful, don't say it." Apply that to relationships. When she asks if you're upset, the vague, "I'm fine," erodes connection, while the precise, "I felt dismissed when you cancelled our plans last minute, can we talk about it?" builds depth. The distinction, emotional granularity. Stoic honesty names the unnamed without malice, like a surgeon excising tumors with a scalpel, not a hammer. Manipulative language, by contrast, is smoke and mirrors. Picture a man who says, "If you really loved me, you'd skip girls' night," cloaking control as vulnerability. Or the backhanded compliment, "You're pretty for a curvy girl." These aren't honest, they're power plays. Epictetus saw through this centuries ago. Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Women detect the gap between words and motives instantly. The man who says, "I'd prefer we stay in, but I want you to enjoy your time out, just text me when you're home safe." His consistency speaks louder than any love-bombing soliloquy. But here's where Stoic honesty shines brightest. It's proactive, not just reactive. Most men wait for direct questions to reveal difficult truths. The Stoic volunteers them, not to unburden himself, but to uphold mutual respect. Imagine confessing a mistake before it's discovered. "I forgot our anniversary dinner reservation. I've booked us somewhere even better next week, and I'm so sorry." That's not just damage control, it's dignity in action. Women remember these moments because they reveal priorities, not comfort, not image, but integrity. Practical honesty also thrives in the mundane. It's returning incorrect change to a cashier when no one's watching. It's admitting you don't know an answer instead of bluffing. These micro-choices form a pattern women scrutinize closely, because if a man is truthful about small things, he'll likely be truthful about big ones. Musonius Rufus taught, "We become just by performing just actions, self-controlled by performing self-controlled actions." Honesty isn't a switch you flip, it's a muscle you strengthen. So how do you cultivate this? Start with Stoic morning affirmations. Today, I'll speak only what's true and necessary. Pause before answering loaded questions, not to craft a pleasing lie, but to frame a constructive truth. And when tension arises, ask Epictetus' question. Is this something I can control? If not, silence may be your wisest honesty. Because in the end, women don't just want a man who tells the truth. They want one who lives it so consistently that his words and his character are indistinguishable. The storm rolled in fast, flights cancelled, events postponed, the entire city scrambling as plans unraveled. But while others groaned about ruined weekends, he was already adjusting. No frustration, no resistance, just a quick pivot to Plan B, as if he'd expected the disruption all along. That's adaptability rooted in amor fati, the Stoic art of loving fate, and it's one of the most quietly impressive traits women recognize in a man. Not because he's passive, but because he proves chaos doesn't shake him. When life swerves, he doesn't white-knuckle the wheel. He steers into the skid with a calm that says, let's see where this takes us. History's greatest Stoics thrived on this principle. Take Seneca, whose wealth and status were stripped overnight when Emperor Claudius exiled him to Corsica. Instead of crumbling, he treated banishment as a laboratory for his philosophy, writing letters that still guide us today. Or Epictetus, who transformed the trauma of slavery into a roadmap for inner freedom. These weren't men who avoided hardship, they were men who recycled it. Women sense this same alchemy in adaptable partners. The ones who turn a cancelled date into a spontaneous picnic, a job loss into a reinvention, a disagreement into a chance to understand her better. But here's what most misunderstand about adaptability. It's not just about rolling with punches, it's about welcoming them. Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his journals, "The obstacle becomes the way," a mantra for seeing detours as shortcuts in disguise. Picture a couple stranded on a road trip, car smoking, miles from help. The rigid man fumes, blaming the GPS or the rental company. The Stoic adapter pops the hood, assesses what's fixable, then turns the weight into an impromptu stargazing session. That shift from fighting reality to finding opportunity isn't just practical, it's magnetic. Women notice because it reveals a man who doesn't just tolerate life's unpredictability, he trusts it. The dating world tests this daily. A flaky first date cancellation. The average guy takes it personally, texts laced with disappointment or passive aggression. The Stoic adapter, he replies, "No worries, rain check for Thursday. No drama, no guilt trips." That lightness isn't indifference, it's security. Women interpret this as emotional bandwidth, the capacity to handle life's hiccups without making them her problem. Modern workplaces magnify this trait. Two colleagues face a last-minute project overhaul. One complains, "This isn't what I signed up for." The other dives into research, muttering, "Interesting, let's see how we can leverage this." Guess who earns respect? Guess who women instinctively see as long-term material? The Stoics called this sympatheia, the interconnectedness of all things. An adaptable man understands that resistance burns energy, acceptance fuels innovation. Practical adaptability starts with mental rehearsals. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, imagining worst-case scenarios to strip them of their sting. Try it. What if the restaurant's closed? What if she's late? What if the deal falls through? Pre-solve these not with anxiety, but with curiosity. When the real test comes, you're not reacting, you're unfolding. Ultimately, amor fati isn't about loving every twist of fate. It's about trusting your ability to meet them. When a woman watches you greet chaos with a half smile and a "let's figure it out," she doesn't just see flexibility, she sees a man who's mastered life's only real constant, change. And that's the kind of stability no illusion of control can match. She's just shared something intimate, a childhood fear, a past failure, a tender hope, and the room seems to hold its breath. Most men react in one of two extremes, retreating behind a wall of stoicism, "Don't worry, it's not a big deal," or oversharing in a way that shifts focus to their own pain. "Yeah, my dad was worse." But the Stoic, he does something different. He leans in just slightly. His voice drops to match her tone, not in pity but in solidarity. That took courage to share. "Thank you. That's the art of protecting vulnerabilities, not by hiding them or weaponizing them, but by honoring them as sacred ground." Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, framed this as the highest form of trust. We should show our wounds only to those who know how to heal them with their silence or their speech. Women notice this balance instantly, the man who is strong enough to witness fragility without fearing it, yet discerning enough not to expose his own recklessly. Ancient Stoicism gets misrepresented as emotional suppression, but Seneca's correspondence reveals the opposite. His most poignant letters, consoling Marcia on her son's death, advising Polybius on grief, are masterclasses in blending strength with vulnerability. He doesn't dismiss pain with platitudes, he meets it with presence. "Tears fall though we resist them," he writes. "They are wrung from us by the tension of our hearts." That tension is key. Modern men often mistake vulnerability for weakness, or worse, perform it as a tactic to manipulate connection. But true Stoic openness is neither armor nor ammunition. It's a carefully calibrated gate, opened only to those who have earned the key. Consider two scenes. First, a woman confesses she's struggling with anxiety. Her date interrupts. "I get it, my ex was crazy too." The conversation flatlines. Now picture the Stoic alternative. He listens fully, then offers, "I've faced panic attacks before. They're brutal but manageable. Would you like to hear what helped me?" That pivot from dismissive to collaborative transforms vulnerability from a liability into a bridge. Women recognize this nuance because it signals emotional literacy, the ability to hold space without hijacking it. But here's where Seneca's wisdom cuts deepest. Protecting vulnerabilities requires reciprocity, not just reception. In his letter on friendship, he warns against indiscriminate unveiling, the tendency to pour out one's soul to anyone who'll listen. Stoic openness isn't about confession booths, it's about mutual exchange. Imagine a man who shares a past failure with his partner only after she's shared hers, not to compete but to say, "You're safe with me." That timing matters. Like a dance, vulnerability thrives in rhythm. Step for step, trust for trust. The modern world tests this daily. Social media glorifies oversharing. "Here's my trauma" in a TikTok trend, while toxic masculinity shames any admission of softness. The Stoic path rejects both extremes. Think of Marcus Aurelius, who wrote frankly about his doubts and struggles, but in a private journal, not a public feed. Or Epictetus, who taught that true strength lies in knowing what to reveal and to whom. Women gravitate toward men who grasp this balance, who can admit, "I don't know" during a difficult decision, or say, "I need support" without self-pity. These moments reveal a rare duality, strength that's unafraid of its own humanity. Practical vulnerability starts with discernment, Seneca's exercise. The three gates test. Before sharing something sensitive, ask, "Is this true? Is it necessary? Is it kind?" Apply that to relationships. Confessing a mistake meets all three. Trauma dumping on a second date doesn't. And when she entrusts you with her wounds, match her courage with your containment, not by fixing but by affirming, "I'm here, however long this takes." Because in the end, women don't need a man who's invincible. They need one who's unshakable, strong enough to bend without breaking, and wise enough to know when to let someone else lean on him. The boardroom erupts in debate, budget cuts loom, and fingers start pointing. Marketing blames sales, operations faults the supply chain. Then there's the CEO who stands not to assign blame, but to remove his own name from the bonus pool. "If we're tightening belts, mine's first," he says. "No grand speech, no self-congratulation, just action." That's leadership by example, the Stoic way, and it's a trait women recognize instantly because it cuts through the noise of empty promises. Authentic leadership isn't about titles or charisma. It's about the quiet alignment of words and deeds. As Marcus Aurelius scribbled in his wartime journals, waste no more time arguing what a good leader should be. B1. History's most admired leaders mastered this. Take James Stockdale, the Navy pilot who endured 7 years as a POW in Vietnam. He didn't rally his fellow prisoners with motivational quotes. He led by etching Stoic principles on prison walls with a fingernail, by refusing early release unless every man captured before him was freed. His wife later wrote that the other prisoners' wives sought her out, saying, "Your husband kept mine alive." That's the ripple effect of leading through action, when a man's choices inspire others to rise, not because they're told to, but because they've witnessed what's possible. Women gravitate toward this quality because it's proof of integrity in its purest form. A man who doesn't just talk about values but embodies them, even especially when it costs him. Modern workplaces teem with counterfeits: the manager who preaches work-life balance but emails at midnight, the influencer touting humility from a gold-plated mansion. Stoic leadership rejects this dissonance. Consider a tech CEO who, during a product recall, didn't hide behind PR spin but personally answered customer service calls for a week. No press releases, no staged photos, just direct ownership of the problem. Women notice these contrasts because they reveal character. As Epictetus, born into slavery, put it, "Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it." A leader who volunteers for the night shift when his team's overwhelmed, who takes the smaller office without complaint, who listens more than he speaks. These aren't just gestures. They're living proof that his authority comes from service, not status. But here's where Stoic leadership diverges from performative sacrifice. It's not about martyring yourself for applause. It's about consistency between principle and practice. Picture a startup founder who rejects lucrative investor terms that conflict with his ethics. He's not virtue signaling, he's demonstrating that some lines won't be crossed regardless of pressure. Women interpret this as predictive data. If he'll stand firm here, he'll likely stand firm in relationships too. Seneca captured this in his letters. A throne doesn't make a leader makes a throne. The dating world magnifies this principle. The guy who claims he's all about honesty but ghosts when conversations get hard. His actions just wrote his biography. Contrast that with the man who, when conflicted about exclusivity, doesn't dodge but says, "I need a week to reflect. You deserve my full clarity." That pause, that willingness to sit with discomfort before responding, is leadership of the self. And women, often hyper-attuned to subtext, register it immediately. Here's a man who leads his own life with intention, which means he's capable of honoring commitments beyond himself. Practical leadership by example starts with micro-choices. The Stoics called this kathikonta, duties or appropriate actions. Hold the door not because she's watching, but because it's who you are. Return the extra change the cashier accidentally gave you. Acknowledge your team's contributions before your own. These aren't just nice habits, they're daily votes for the kind of man you claim to be. And when a woman sees those votes pile up, she doesn't just hear your values, she lives them. Because the most compelling leadership isn't announced, it's witnessed. His bank account isn't just a record of transactions, it's a ledger of his priorities. That's what separates financial discipline from mere frugality in the Stoic mindset. While the world obsesses over flashy cars and designer labels as status symbols, the Stoic approach to money reveals something far more compelling to women. A man who understands that true wealth isn't measured by what he can flaunt, but by what he can control. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who lived simply despite his aristocratic roots, put it bluntly, "It's not the man who has too little who's poor, but the one who craves more." That craving for instant gratification, for keeping up appearances, is exactly what financial discipline masters. Consider two men at a restaurant. One orders the most expensive bottle on the menu, casually mentioning the price to impress his date. The other selects a modest but excellent wine within his means, then directs the conversation to her interests rather than the check. Women don't just notice the difference, they interpret it. The first man signals insecurity, using money as a prop for validation. The second demonstrates something far more attractive, the quiet confidence of a man who doesn't need to prove his worth through consumption. This is Stoic moderation in action, not deprivation but discernment. The Romans knew this well. Seneca, one of history's wealthiest philosophers, lived in a modest home despite advising Emperor Nero. He didn't preach poverty, he practiced intentionality, writing, "Money should be neither master nor slave, but a well-managed tool." Modern research confirms this wisdom. A Cambridge University study found that couples who argue about money early in relationships are twice as likely to divorce. Women recognize that financial discipline isn't about pinching pennies. It's about proving a man can steward shared resources thoughtfully. When he skips the luxury apartment he can't comfortably afford in favor of a sensible home with savings intact, he's telegraphing long-term stability, not short-term status. But here's where Stoic finance differs from spreadsheet obsession. It's not about hoarding wealth, it's about aligning spending with values. Imagine a man who drives a used car but invests in cooking classes to share better meals with his partner, or who wears simple clothes but never hesitates to buy books that expand his mind. These choices reveal priorities beyond superficial displays. Epictetus, who owned nothing but a wooden bowl until he saw a child drinking from cupped hands and threw even that away, taught that freedom comes from wanting what you already have. Women sense this mindset when a man's contentment doesn't fluctuate with his bank balance, when he's as present on a picnic as he would be at a five-star restaurant. Practical financial discipline shows up in subtle tells. The guy who budgets for annual trips to visit aging parents demonstrates loyalty. The one who quietly pays off student loans ahead of schedule proves delayed gratification isn't just theory. Even small habits like repairing shoes instead of replacing them, or opting out of speculative cryptocurrency frenzies signal a temperament women associate with reliability. Marcus Aurelius warned, "When you let external things control your happiness, you'll never be free." Financial discipline is the ultimate test of that freedom, the ability to enjoy money without being enslaved by it. So how does a man cultivate this trait? Start with the Stoic view from above. Exercise. Imagine looking down at your life from old age. Will those impulse purchases matter? Or will the security you built and the experiences it enabled define your legacy? Track spending not to restrict joy, but to redirect it toward what truly aligns with your values. Because when a woman sees a man who treats money as a means rather than an end, she doesn't just see fiscal responsibility, she sees the foundation of a life well lived. Time never asks for respect, it simply takes it. That's the Stoic understanding behind punctuality, a trait that goes far deeper than clock watching. Picture two men waiting at a cafe. One checks his phone every 30 seconds, sighing loudly as his date runs late. The other sits with a book, fully present, glancing up only when she arrives, flustered and apologetic, to greet her with genuine warmth rather than passive aggression. The difference isn't just manners, it's philosophy in motion. Stoicism teaches that time is the one non-renewable resource, and how we honor it, our own and others, reveals our values in high definition. Chronic lateness isn't just a logistical hiccup, it's a subtle form of disrespect disguised as disorganization. The Stoics framed this as an ethical issue. Seneca, in his essay on the shortness of life, wrote, "We are tight-fisted with property and money, yet think too little of wasting time, the one thing about which we should all be the toughest misers." Women decode this instinctively when a man shows up 20 minutes late to a date with a breezy, "sorry, traffic," versus the one who arrives early having accounted for delays. The latter isn't just considerate, he's demonstrating that her time, her life, isn't a placeholder for his convenience. But Stoic respect for time isn't just about punctuality. It's about presence. Imagine a couple at dinner. One stares at his phone between bites, distracted by notifications, while the other listens with undivided attention. The distracted man might argue he's multitasking, but Epictetus would call this self-deception. If you try to be everywhere at once, you're nowhere fully. Women notice this fragmentation because it telegraphs a harsh truth. A man who can't focus won't just waste minutes, he'll miss moments. The birthday party where his child takes their first swing at a piñata, the quiet confession she shares at midnight. These aren't items on a schedule, they're unrepeatable fragments of a shared life. Contrast this with the Stoic practice of premeditatio temporum, anticipating how time will be spent before it's allocated. Marcus Aurelius began each morning by visualizing his day, not just to manage tasks but to align them with purpose. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say. When a man schedules dates thoughtfully, booking reservations instead of winging it, planning activities that reflect her interests, he's not just being polished. He's proving he understands that her hours are precious, not disposable. The modern workplace magnifies this principle. The colleague who wanders into meetings 5 minutes late, derailing the agenda, is viewed differently from the one whose preparation starts the discussion on time. Women extrapolate from these patterns. A man who respects collective time in professional settings will likely value their time in personal ones. It's why small gestures, texting when delayed, ending conversations before overstaying welcome, carry disproportionate weight. They're micro-proofs of a macro mindset. Life's too short for half-hearted attention. Here's the paradox: true respect for time isn't rigid, it's adaptable. The Stoics weren't fanatics about punctuality, they were fanatics about intention. When unforeseen delays strike, the principled man doesn't make excuses, he makes amends. "I underestimated the commute, let me get the next round," holds more integrity than a dozen perfunctory apologies, because accountability, not perfection, is the real measure of regard. Cultivating this trait starts with reframing time as currency, not in the cliched "time is money" sense, but as Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Your lifetime is all you have." Audit your days. How many hours vanish into social media voids or indecision? The Stoic solution: memento mori, remember you will die, not to incite fear but to instill urgency. Trim the fat from your schedule. Cancel unused gym memberships, mute non-essential notifications, stop attending events out of obligation. When a woman sees a man who guards his time like a sacred trust, she doesn't just see efficiency, she sees a life lived deliberately. And that's the ultimate aphrodisiac. The emergency room hums with controlled chaos. A young intern freezes mid-procedure, hands trembling over a patient's wound. Two approaches unfold: the senior physician who barks, "Step aside if you can't handle this," and the one who slides in quietly, guiding the intern's hands with his own. Breathe, watch the angle, now close. That's Stoic compassion in motion, strength that uplifts instead of overpowers, empathy that fortifies rather than diminishes. Women recognize this distinction instantly because true compassion isn't about feeling sorry for someone, it's about believing in their capacity to rise. Ancient Stoics like Epictetus, a former slave who taught others to transcend their circumstances, modeled this daily. When students confessed self-doubt, he didn't coddle them with empty reassurances. He challenged them: "If you say you're not ready, how long will you wait?" His compassion was a mirror reflecting back their untapped potential. Contrast that with modern pity, which often whispers, "You poor thing," effectively freezing people in their struggles. Women gravitate toward men who offer the former, not rescue but resources. Imagine a partner overwhelmed at work. The pity response coddles, "Just quit, it's too hard." The Stoic alternative empowers. What part feels insurmountable? Let's strategize. One treats her as fragile, the other as capable. The caregiver archetype reveals this best. Watch a nurse helping an elderly patient relearn to walk after a stroke. She doesn't weep at their struggles or take over the task. She steadies them with firm hands and firmer words. Again. You've got this. That balance, acknowledging pain while refusing to define someone by it, is the essence of Stoic compassion. It's why women remember teachers who said, "This essay isn't there yet, so let's refine your argument," more fondly than those who handed out easy A's. Growth, not sympathy, is the ultimate act of care. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated this as emperor, personally funding orphanages not with paternalistic charity, but with education programs to break cycles of poverty. His journals reveal the mindset. The art of living is more like wrestling than dancing because it requires standing firm while helping others find their footing. Modern mentors embody this when they offer tough love to protégés, not "you're amazing." When work is subpar but you're capable of better, here's how. Women notice when a man's support comes with standards because it signals he sees her as an equal participant in her own rise. But here's the critical nuance: empowerment requires listening before acting. A Stoic doesn't assume he knows what help looks like, he asks. Picture a friend going through a breakup. Pity bombards her with ice cream and "he's a jerk" platitudes. Stoic compassion first asks, "Do you need comfort or solutions today?" Then responds accordingly. This tailored approach, rooted in Seneca's advice to prescribe no cure before diagnosing the illness, builds trust. Women instinctively trust men who can discern when to offer a shoulder and when to offer a strategy because life demands both. Practical compassion thrives in small moments too. It's handing a homeless person a meal while looking them in the eye, not tossing coins without stopping. It's correcting a colleague's mistake privately, not showcasing their error in a meeting. These choices reveal a man who understands dignity is part of the gift, because in the end, women don't just want to be cared for, they want to be seen, challenged, and above all, believed in. And that kind of compassion, it doesn't weaken either party, it makes them both stronger. The notebook lies open on his desk at dawn, not for lists or doodles, but for the quiet practice of turning life into lessons. While others sleep, he interrogates his yesterday with ink and honesty. Where did I act with courage? Where did fear steer me? This is Stoic self-improvement in its purest form, and it's the final trait women notice, not because it's loud, but because it's limitless. Continuous growth isn't about climbing some mythical ladder of perfection. It's the daily discipline of becoming, the kind of ambition that doesn't shout its goals but lives them in the margins of journals, the spines of well-worn books, the humility to say, "I don't know yet, but I'm learning." Marcus Aurelius left us the ultimate proof in his Meditations, a personal journal never meant for publication. Think about that, the most powerful man in the ancient world, ruling an empire, waging wars, yet carving out pre-dawn hours to refine his character. Women recognize this dichotomy instantly, the man who's achieved much but rests on nothing. It's the entrepreneur who still takes online courses in his field long after securing his first million, the artist who critiques his own work more ruthlessly than any critic, the partner who asks, "How did I show up for you this week, and where did I fall short?" That last question alone separates performative growth from the real thing. Consider two men at a dinner party. One dominates conversation with tales of his promotions and possessions. The other listens intently, then shares a recent failure not for sympathy but as a stepping stone. "I mishandled a client meeting last month. Here's what it taught me about active listening." The difference isn't just vulnerability, it's directional. Women gravitate toward men who treat life as a classroom because it signals something revolutionary in today's world, a man who's secure enough to be unfinished. The Stoics built systems for this. Epictetus had his students journal daily, not just recounting events but dissecting them. Why did that comment anger me? What does this reveal about what I value? Modern research backs this. Studies show reflective writing increases emotional intelligence, a trait women consistently rank as more attractive than income or looks. Apply that to relationships. The man who journals about an argument not to fuel resentment but to pinpoint his triggers is the man who shows up differently next time. That's growth you can feel, but growth isn't just introspection, it's expansion. Seneca, despite his wealth, lived ascetically for periods to test his self-control. He called it training not for pain but for perspective. Today's equivalent might be the guy who takes cold showers not to brag, but to master discomfort, or who learns a language to connect with his partner's grandparents. These aren't resume boosters, they're character builders. Women notice because self-directed challenges reveal priorities. A man who invests in his mind and spirit is investing in the quality of his presence with others. Here's the secret Stoics knew: growth isn't linear, it's spiral. You'll revisit the same lessons: patience, courage, resilience, but deeper each time. The key is staying on the path. That's why women admire the man who carries a book everywhere, not as a prop but as a portal. Why they're drawn to the one who can say, "I was wrong, here's my new understanding." Because in a world obsessed with projecting perfection, the man committed to progress isn't just growing smarter or stronger, he's becoming someone who can grow with her. And that's the trait that makes all the others shine. There you have it, 25 traits that create the kind of man who doesn't just catch a woman's eye but holds her respect. But let's be clear, this isn't about checking boxes or performing for attention. It's about something far deeper: cultivating a way of being that radiates from the inside out. Think of these traits as a blueprint, not a script. They're the quiet signals that reveal who you are when no one's watching, the unshakable foundation beneath the surface charm. From emotional resilience to financial discipline, from the art of listening to the courage of accountability, each of these qualities is a thread in the fabric of Stoic character. And here's the truth: women don't just notice them individually, they sense the synergy between them. The man who handles rejection with grace, he's the same one who respects boundaries without resentment. The one who leads by example in his career, that's the man who'll protect her vulnerabilities without hesitation. These traits aren't isolated, they're interconnected, each one reinforcing the others until they become second nature. So where do you start? Not by trying to master all 25 at once. That's a recipe for overwhelm. Instead, pick one, just one, to focus on each day. Maybe today it's non-reactivity. When traffic snarls or someone cuts you off, breathe through the impulse to react. Tomorrow, it could be generosity without expectation, holding the door for a stranger without waiting for a thank you, or leaving a larger tip simply because it's right. The day after, gratitude. Jot down 3 specific things your partner or friend did that you might have overlooked, and voice one of them with sincerity. This is how Stoicism works in practice, not as a philosophy to debate, but as a life to live. Marcus Aurelius didn't write his meditations to impress posterity. He wrote them to remind himself how to show up in a chaotic world. Epictetus didn't teach students to memorize maxims, he trained them to internalize principles until they became reflex. That's your goal, not perfection but progress. Not a performance but a practice. As you move forward, remember this: Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotion or pretending life's hardships don't sting. It's about feeling those stings deeply, then choosing not to let them steer you. It's about embracing the full spectrum of human experience: joy, grief, challenge, triumph, while staying anchored to your core. And when you do that consistently, that's when the right people take notice, not because you're flawless, but because you're real. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Which of these 25 traits resonated most deeply? Was it the quiet confidence of emotional resilience or the magnetic pull of purposeful living? Drop a comment below, share your thoughts, your struggles, even your skepticism. This isn't about lecturing, it's about learning from each other, because the Stoic path isn't walked alone, it's paved by those who have gone before and those walking beside you now. So tell me, which trait will you start with today? The first step is always the one that matters most.